a parking problem at midnight, a completely dry coat in the pouring rain, and the most shocking discovery waiting at a bus terminal that changed everything I thought I knew about single mothers, relationships, and the word commitment. I'm seeing more and more stories online these days about dating single mothers. Some people call them single moms with baggage. Unfortunately, at the time this story takes place, I didn't know much about the challenges that could come with this territory. And that ignorance nearly cost me serious problems in life. I'm telling this story for one simple reason. I hope it might save someone from similar troubles. Maybe someone will hear this and learn something, even if it's from my mistakes. At the time, I had just turned 25, and so had she, let's call her Jessica. But her 25 years, as it turned out, were nothing like my 25 years. By age 25, she already had a divorce behind her and a small son in her care. By that same age, my only major accomplishment was owning a car. I had no kids, no divorces, basically a clean slate. Let me fast forward through the early part and just say that we started dating. What attracted me to her was primarily her mature and thoughtful approach to life. She wasn't interested in nightclub scenes or party life. She worked at a decent job, kept her house in order, prioritized everything for her child, all the right things. I'll admit honestly that looking at all this at the time, I suddenly wanted that same kind of order in my life. I wanted to settle down and become what people call a responsible, decent man. But as I understand now, it was precisely after these kinds of thoughts that I almost got taken for everything I was worth. "Why don't you move in with us?" Jessica suggested one evening when I was visiting them again. And here was my first mistake. "Why don't we have you move in with me instead?" I asked her. It turned out that her place supposedly had more rooms. Her child's daycare was much closer there. Plus, she'd been going to her regular gym near her house for several years. Fine. So, I moved in. From this moment, the gentle and caring routine shifted slightly to a routine filled with questions and demands. And how it all ended could probably be included in a textbook on manipulation. Almost 6 months had passed since we'd met, and by this time, I was essentially acting like a husband. After all, I thought, relationships don't depend on a marriage certificate. A wedding is just the middle point of a relationship, certainly not the beginning. What I mean is that by this point, I was behaving like a husband. I was doing all kinds of household tasks, leaving work early when she couldn't pick up her child, paying for everything, and so on. In all this unexpected busyness that had started in my life, I completely forgot to ask her about something important. Where and how exactly her first ex-husband was living these days. Of course, when we first started dating, she'd mentioned something about him in passing, but she loved discussing our relationship 3 times more than she liked talking about her divorce. So we didn't talk too much about that topic. But eventually, every rope has an end, and a series of events finally forced me to leave this Jessica. One day we started talking about the gym she'd been attending regularly for several months. "Is it far?" I asked her. "I should probably start getting ready for spring myself. It's fall now, then winter, so I'll have just enough time to get back in shape for summer. Give me the address," I said to Jessica. It turned out there was no gym near our house, and she hadn't been going to one for the past several weeks either. "So why have you been telling me you've been working out for so long?" I asked her. "I wanted to impress you. Don't men do the same thing?" Okay, so no gym. But it got worse from there. Then came our first real fight, which happened when I apparently asked her an inappropriate question. Even funnier was her response. Her house had a smart home system where you could control appliances through your phone. I grabbed my phone, it was dead. I quickly used her phone to turn on the device I needed, then put my phone on the charger. Now I needed to turn the device off. I picked up Jessica's iPhone. It had a passcode. Just then she walked into the room, saw her phone in my hands, and with an almost pig-like squeal, she grabbed the phone and yanked it away, nearly dropping it on the floor. "Are you okay? What's so important that you had to protect it like that?" "This is my space. It's mine, that's all," she said, and went to the kitchen. I made note of this outburst internally. About 15 minutes later, she came back and handed me her phone. "Don't be offended. I was just raised this way," she said through gritted teeth. But this explanation wasn't enough for me, and I didn't take the phone. I filed this incident away in my memory, and it turned out that was the right thing to do. Meanwhile, fall had arrived, and the next warning sign for me came specifically because of the rainy weather. My work schedule's irregular. I might leave in the morning much earlier than her, or much later. Same thing in the evening. Sometimes I can be home by 3 p.m., sometimes I don't get home until midnight. On one such day, I called my future non-wife Jessica, and after quickly picking up her child from daycare, was home with him by 4 p.m. It was raining outside, and we were expecting Jessica home around 6 p.m. That time came, Jessica arrived home, and we met her at the door. I took her bags from her as she entered, and I looked at her coat. There was hardly a drop of water on it. "Did you take a taxi or something?" I asked her. "The bus. Why would I need a taxi?" I looked at the umbrella hanging in the closet. It was in its case and completely dry. If it hadn't been for that incident with the phone, I probably wouldn't have paid any attention to the rain or the umbrella. But in our case, I did notice. Fine, let it slide. A few more weeks passed, and she came home dry again. I didn't hint at anything. "Why don't you just tell me how this is possible?" She laughed. "The bus, my dear friend, can stop not only at bus stops, but also on request. Not far from our building, I just ask to get off before our regular stop, and the driver stops for me right here." We did indeed live not far from the terminal stop of one of the city bus routes. And apparently, since this area of the city was still relatively new, one of the regular stops was quite far away, while the next stop was already the terminal. But the idea that big city buses would pick up and drop off people like taxis along the route, something seemed off about that. But as they say, if you're not caught, you're not a thief. But eventually, I did catch her. One night, I came home, and of course, there were no free parking spaces near the house. At that time, not just near the house, but nowhere in sight. I spent half an hour circling the neighborhood, and finally just started driving along the shoulder, hoping to find the nearest pocket or space for my car. The closest spot turned out to be almost at the bus terminal. From our window, you couldn't see it at all, and normally I would never leave my car there, but I had no choice that night. I parked there, locked the car, and went to bed. The next day, I was supposed to be home all day. The child was staying with me that day too. By evening, I remembered, damn, my car is parked God knows where. And now there seemed to be plenty of free spaces under our windows. I started getting ready to move my car closer. The child asked to come with me. Fine, I took him along, grabbed my car keys, and we walked to the terminal to move my car closer. I got in my car, started it, warmed it up, and began driving onto the road to turn around. The road markings showed double solid lines. The nearest U-turn was at the bus terminal, but it was only about 20 seconds away. Without any ulterior motive, I drove onto the road, reached the terminal, made my U-turn there, and saw Jessica getting out of the driver's seat of a bus parked at the terminal stop. She had some things in her hands and was heading toward a small building where the drivers hang out. I got out of my car, took her son by the hand, and we walked toward the door of that building. We approached and looked inside. My almost wife was sitting on the lap of a bus driver, and the boy I was holding by the hand broke free from me and ran inside yelling, "Daddy!" There I stood, thinking about what to do. Everyone was silent, and as I understood, everything was clear to everyone. So, Daddy was the driver of one of those buses. Now it was clear who this kind driver was who stopped the bus at our building almost every day. But what struck me most was her reaction, or rather, the complete lack of one. I asked if she wasn't ashamed. She said this was her ex-husband, and her custody of this apartment and other things depended on him. I quickly drove back to her apartment and started packing my things. And that's when she revealed herself completely. As it turned out, anything without official marriage registration was nonsense to her, and she believed relationships could only begin at the registry office. The fact that I was investing fully in our family and household, that I was essentially changing my entire life to accommodate her all of this, was unimportant and without guarantees, as she put it. In other words, without a marriage certificate, she could do whatever she wanted, especially, as she put it, with the biological father of her child. I don't have enough experience with such inadequate behavior to last a lifetime. And now I sit and think, what if we had lived at my place and I had never appeared at this terminal? How many months or maybe years would I have spent figuring out all her little games? She certainly would never have confessed to me after all. For her, this was normal. The terminal discovery was like pulling back a curtain on an elaborate performance I didn't even know I was watching. Jessica had constructed this entire fiction about taking the bus, about being a responsible single mother just trying to make it work, about her ex-husband being some distant figure from her past. But the reality was that she was maintaining an active relationship with him while using me as financial support and domestic help. I was essentially subsidizing her reunion with her ex-husband without knowing it. What's particularly manipulative about her approach was how she framed everything in terms of her child's needs. The apartment had more rooms for him. His daycare was closer. She needed stability for his sake. All compelling reasons that made me feel selfish for questioning any of her arrangements. Meanwhile, she was using her role as a devoted mother to cover for regular meetings with her ex-husband. The gym that didn't exist, the impossibly dry coat in the rain, the locked phone she guarded like state secrets, all of it was part of maintaining her double life. Her reaction when caught was perhaps the most revealing part of her character. No shame, no apology, no acknowledgement that she'd been deceptive. Instead, she immediately shifted to justifying her behavior by claiming, "I had no right to expect fidelity without a marriage certificate." This is classic manipulation, taking the moral high ground after being caught in deception. She turned my discovery of her lies into a lecture about my unrealistic expectations. The "without guarantees" comment was particularly telling. From her perspective, I was supposed to provide all the benefits of marriage, financial support, domestic partnership, childcare assistance, emotional investment, while she maintained complete freedom to pursue other relationships because we weren't legally married. It was a one-way arrangement designed entirely in her favor, and she'd convinced herself it was perfectly reasonable. Looking back, I can see how carefully she'd structured this situation. Moving me into her territory instead of the reverse gave her complete control over the environment. I was the outsider in her world, dependent on her explanations for everything I observed. The irregular work schedule that initially seemed like a minor detail was actually perfect for her deception. Since I was unpredictably home early or late, she couldn't establish any reliable patterns that might expose her routine meetings with her ex-husband. But the bus terminal discovery revealed that some lies are impossible to maintain indefinitely. Physical reality eventually intrudes on even the most elaborate deceptions. What strikes me most about this experience is how completely I'd misread the situation. I thought I was dating a mature, responsible single mother who'd learned from her past mistakes and was ready for a serious relationship. Instead, I was dating someone who'd never actually ended her previous relationship and was using me as a convenient cover while she worked toward reuniting with her ex-husband. The child's reaction when he saw his father at the terminal made it clear this wasn't some recent development. This little boy knew exactly where to find his daddy, which meant these meetings had been happening regularly for quite some time. I'd been living in their house, supporting their family, and helping raise a child whose parents were actively working on their reconciliation behind my back. Jessica's final justification that she could do whatever she wanted with her child's father was the most honest thing she said during our entire relationship. It revealed that from her perspective, I'd never been her partner. I'd been temporary financial assistance while she sorted out her real relationship. The experience taught me that some people view unmarried relationships as consequence-free zones, where they can behave however they want without accountability. For Jessica, the lack of legal marriage meant she had no obligations to honesty, fidelity, or even basic respect. But perhaps the most important lesson was about paying attention to inconsistencies. The non-existent gym, the protected phone, the mysteriously dry coat individually. These might seem like minor quirks or even innocent lies. Together, they painted a picture of systematic deception. If I hadn't accidentally needed to park at that terminal, I might have spent months or years trying to figure out why something always felt slightly off in our relationship. The truth was hiding in plain sight, but it took a random parking problem to reveal it. That's how I learned never to ignore the small lies, because they're usually covering up much bigger ones. If you've ever discovered that your entire relationship was built on deception, or if small inconsistencies made you question someone's honesty, share your story in the comments. I read every single one. And if you've got your own experience with dating someone who is still entangled with their ex, send it to me. My contact's in the description. Because the next story I'll share proves that sometimes the biggest lies are hiding behind the most reasonable explanations.